We're going to live here as a family, so outsiders need to leave. My mother-in-law slowly and carefully explained this to make sure I understood. Nelda's face turned red while she put her hand over her mouth. Unable to hold back, Nelda burst into laughter, which triggered my mother-in-law to laugh out loud as well. Right after my father passed away, my in-laws seemed to have been lying in wait, and they showed up trying to take over our high-rise apartment. Surrounded by their laughter, I just bowed my head. My shoulders were shaking. Perhaps feeling pity for me, Brad spoke words of comfort. Don't be so down. I let you be by your father's side, so you should have no regrets. Now it's my turn to do the same. Why don't you go visit Helen? Though, I'm not sure if she will be okay with it. I shook my shoulders, holding back my tears. But I couldn't bear it anymore. Suddenly, I lifted my face and started laughing loudly. Ahahaha. I wiped the tears from the corner of my eyes. Do as you please. I've already contacted the lawyer. It's arrogant to emphasize that I did my filial duty. Thinking that they were enjoying themselves behind our backs, deceiving me and my father, anger welled up within me. I was determined to spoil their plans of joy following my father's death. I am Michelle White, 53 years old. My only daughter, Helen, graduated from university this year and started working. I thought I'd be more at ease after finishing raising her, but I'm still worried about Helen, who lives alone in the city. It has been 6 months since she started her job, but she hasn't come home even once. I wonder if Helen is eating properly, I blurted out during dinner with my husband. Tonight's menu was meat and potatoes, Helen's favorite. Eating that, I couldn't help but think of her face. She just started her job, so I know she's busy, but that's exactly why I want to make nutritious meals for her. Brad was right in front of me, but he didn't even glance my way. He clutched his smartphone in his left hand, staring at it while eating. He wasn't focused on the meal, spilling the broth on the table and making unpleasant chewing noises. Brad, are you listening? Brad gave no response. It seemed like my voice never reached his ears, and the concerns I had once again felt like mere monologues, shutting my anxious feelings in. When was the last time Brad and I had a proper conversation? I never thought we would become a couple so lacking in communication when we got married. I met Brad 23 years ago. A friend introduced him to me just before I turned 30. Brad was well educated and worked for a major company, which made me nervous, but I was immediately taken by his kind, confident smile. It seemed he liked me too, and we started dating. He always planned dates at sophisticated cafes and romantic spots featured in fashion magazines, escorting me each time. I've been really focused on my work and didn't have much luck with women, but meeting you felt as if it were predestined. I can tell you are the one for me. His handsome features made even the sweetest words seem fitting. He was like a prince who openly expressed his love. But I was not a princess. I was just an ordinary office worker. I was anxious about whether I was good enough for someone so elite. While I was having such worries, Brad unexpectedly proposed to me. While it should have been a joyful moment, the fact that we had only known each other for 2 months made me anxious, and I couldn't say yes. When I shared my concerns, he gently embraced me and whispered in my ear, "Marriage doesn't need extra emotions. To me, you are the best." So we got married, and I felt like the happiest woman in the world. That was until the day after our wedding when our new married life began. "Michelle, are you really going to feed me this?" Brad said coldly as he looked at me, setting the breakfast on the table. His face was very cold, and he clearly seemed in a bad mood, though I couldn't understand why. It was our first day living together, so I had put extra effort into the cooking. I prepared a lavish breakfast, including an omelet with crispy bacon, yogurt parfait with berries and oats, and freshly baked scones right from the oven. I just need coffee and bread in the morning. It's hard to read the newspaper with anything else. Ah, I see. You're the type who doesn't think about efficiency and enjoys a leisurely, inefficient meal in the morning. How that figures. Brad's attitude had changed completely since yesterday. I was so surprised by his words that I was left speechless. He stared at my shocked face. "That foolish look on your face, I like it," he said with a grin. However, he left the house without touching the breakfast. Left alone with the untouched meal, I had no choice but to stand there. I had planned to take the day off work to tidy up the house, but I was so shocked by his words that I couldn't move, neither physically nor emotionally. Around 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, my mother and sister-in-law Nelda entered the room without a greeting. Michelle, it seems you tried to impress Brad with your cooking this morning, but that was futile. Brad is not a simple man who can be manipulated with food," my mother-in-law continued without pausing for breath. Brad always eats bread at home and goes to work as usual. It's unfortunate for him, especially so early in the marriage. Nelda grimaced as if enjoying the situation. It seemed Brad had stopped by his parents' house before going to work this morning. A minor misunderstanding between us had been exposed to his family, and I felt embarrassed. Nelda looked around the room and sighed dramatically. Mom, look, there are still moving boxes in the corner of the room. Michelle is really sloppy, isn't she? Oh, I was just about to clean those up, I replied desperately, but my mother-in-law immediately dismissed it. No excuses. Look, you're just an ordinary office worker who is all talk and no action. You're not a good match for Brad, not at all. You should be grateful that he accepted someone like you. My mother-in-law sat down. Now, make some tea. You should at least be able to serve tea without being told, she hurried me. I quickly made the tea and offered it to them. After taking a sip, my mother-in-law snorted with laughter. This is terrible. The tea is too weak. For someone who works as an office worker serving tea, this is quite poor. Both my mother-in-law and Nelda slurped their scalding tea noisily. I wonder if Brad is truly satisfied with such a girl. Well, maybe that's just what you get from a daughter-in-law. Brad does like you, Michelle. Despite their insinuating comments, I couldn't find the courage to speak up in front of my husband's family. Nelda lived at home. She was single and surrounded herself with idle merchandise. She wasn't even a regular office worker like me, and she even recently quit her part-time job at a supermarket. Despite being hurt by her remarks, I had no room to argue. I had hoped for a sweet newlywed life, but my husband scorned me, and my mother-in-law and Nelda often made snide remarks. This was not the life I had hoped for. I couldn't consider divorce right after getting married. Half a year later, while I was troubled, I became pregnant and eventually gave birth to Helen. The blatant nastiness from my in-laws decreased. It wasn't because they were too cruel to berate a mother in front of a young child. Rather, it was because Nelda became obsessed with the popular Korean wave. My mother-in-law also became busy with watching TV dramas from morning to night and going on pilgrimages to drama sites together. As a result, they showed less interest in me and my daughter. It's sad that Helen didn't feel her grandmother's love, but maintaining a proper distance had somehow kept our household calm. Brad seemed satisfied as long as I fully understood and supported his pace of life. Time flew by, and before I knew it, we'd been married for 23 years. While it can't be said that I am extremely happy, we have been living a stable and troubled life. I thought time would just quietly continue to pass. However, Brad surprisingly suggested something new. How about we live together now? I was so surprised that I dropped my spoon. Brad's voice, which I hadn't heard in a while, seemed almost like a hallucination. What? I gasped, feeling the blood drain from my face. I thought he meant living with my mother-in-law, but I was mistaken. Isn't your father going to rebuild his house? I thought, why not live together then? I had mentioned my father's house situation to Brad a few days ago but didn't get any reaction at that time. However, it seemed he had been listening after all. It's ridiculous that he wants to rebuild his house in his 80s, even if the house is aging. Well, that's probably just an excuse. He surely wants to bring you closer by building a new house. Your mother passed away a few years ago and your father is getting old. Living alone must be tough. While confused by the unexpected suggestion, I desperately tried to understand. But I'd prefer to live in an apartment, not a detached house. It's us who are going to be living there long-term, not your father, so I hope this bit of selfishness can be excused in exchange for living together. Without mocking my stunned silence, Brad continued in a gentle tone. Also, I'm worried about you, Michelle. You worry too much about Helen. Now that you're finally free from childcare, it's time to start the second phase of your life. Changing environments will help refresh your mood. Thank you, Brad. Although he might seem aloof, he had been considering my feelings. Tears welled up in my eyes. I immediately talked to my father about moving in together, and he was very happy and couldn't thank Brad enough. Once the decision was made, Brad acted quickly, as if he had been eyeing it from the start, and contracted a new high-rise apartment. Even though Brad works at a major company, going for a high-rise apartment was surprising. I only receive a monthly allowance for living expenses and am not familiar with our savings, but when I checked the market price of the apartment, my head started to spin. Now that Helen is independent, I don't feel like living in a family-type apartment anymore. I want to start the second phase of my life. Since it's going to be our last home, I think it's okay to indulge a little. It seemed my father had already agreed and plans had been moving forward without my knowledge. Although I felt a bit anxious, living in the high-rise apartment was actually very comfortable.